Saturday morning. I had just poured my first cup of coffee and was watching steam curl into the gray Colorado sky when my phone buzzed. James Carter, my realtor from years ago. The man who helped me find the one place that was mine. "Hey, Maya," he said, voice cautious. "Quick question. Are you selling your cabin?" My hand froze on the mug. "No, why?" "There's a listing up for your mountain property near Aspen. Same photos, same lot size. It's live right now, but the contact number isn't yours." A sharp, cold sensation slid down my spine. "Whose number is it?" He hesitated. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure, but I reversed it. "It's a woman named Linda Hayes, your mother." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. The silence was so dense I could hear the tick of the clock above the stove. "I'll send you the link," James added gently. "Thought I'd check with you first before taking any steps." After we hung up, I opened the message. There it was. My cabin. My name not listed, but every other detail was exact. Photos I'd never taken. A description worded just close enough to sound legitimate. "Peaceful alpine getaway." It read, "Available for private viewing." There was Mom's number at the bottom, bold in public, like she had every right. I didn't even feel anger yet, just a hollow rising pressure in my chest, like the ground beneath something sacred had started to crack. I set the phone down, walked to the sink, and stood staring through the window knuckles, white on the edge of the counter. My mother was trying to sell my home. I picked up the phone again and called her. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Hi, sweetheart." Mom said, her voice laced with that artificial warmth she saved for when she knew she was in trouble. "How's your weekend going?" "Why is my cabin listed online?" I asked, skipping any pretense. A pause then, in that same tone. "Oh, you saw that? You put my property up for sale." "Well," she said, drawing the word out like it needed softening. "Your father and I just thought it would be best. You're so busy, Maya. You never even use it anymore." "That's not your decision to make." Another pause. I could hear her settle into her kitchen chair. "It's for Emily. She's expecting. And she and Noah need a place. They've outgrown that little apartment already. You know how expensive things are now." My jaw locked. "You didn't ask me because you knew I'd say no," she said plainly. "We're not trying to hurt you. It's family. She needs help. You always help." I closed my eyes. "It's not yours to sell." "We're not doing anything illegal," she said quickly. "We have copies of your ID, your tax forms, old documents with your signature. We can manage the paperwork if that's what you're worried about." I stared at the wall across from me like it might split open. "You mean you're going to forge my name?" "It's just easier this way," she said gently, as if explaining something logical to a child. "And we know you'll understand. Once you calm down, you've always been the responsible one." She said it like it was a compliment. Before I could respond, I heard Dad's voice in the background. "Is she upset?" Mom covered the phone. "It's fine. I'm handling it." I ended the call. Then I opened my laptop and searched for James's number again. I didn't call James right away. Instead, I sat there with my laptop open, the cursor blinking on an empty email draft. My hands hovered over the keys, but I couldn't type yet. Not through the wave of memories that hit me all at once. It wasn't just the cabin. It was the way they always framed it. "You're so responsible." The words they used to convince me to pay Emily's last 2 semesters of college when her scholarship fell through. The same words they used when her wedding budget spiraled out of control and I wrote a check to cover the difference because she deserved a perfect day. The first time I agreed to help with the mortgage was when Dad got laid off. I told myself it was temporary. They promised they'd pay me back. That was nearly 3 years ago. $800 a month. Automatically withdrawn. Quietly taken. No one ever brought it up. Not even me. Because that's what I was trained to be. Quiet, reliable, the one who fixes things without being asked. The daughter who gives, not the one who questions why no one ever gives back. I used to think it was love that doing more meant I was a good person, that being the stable one was a kind of honor. But sitting there realizing they were planning to forge my signature and sell the only thing I owned outright, I saw it clearly for the first time. This wasn't love. It was control. Just softened by years of obligation and polite smiles. I opened my banking app, canceled the auto payment. Then I picked up my phone, took a breath, and called James. James picked up on the second ring. "Maya," he said, voice steady but curious. "Everything okay?" "No," I said, "but I need your help. I want to sell the cabin." A pause. "You sure?" "I'm sure. Fast. If possible." "How soon could we close if everything lined up?" "Well, if the buyer has cash and financing in place, maybe 10 days. Why? Do you remember that sheriff you mentioned? Is he still interested?" "Yeah. Ethan Brooks. Been looking for something like your place for months. Lives down in Durango. Quiet guy. Solid income. Pre-approved. Why, I'll knock $10,000 off the asking price and add a bonus to your commission if we can close before next Friday." James whistled. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." "Okay, I'll make the call." After we hung up, I opened my laptop again. I wasn't done. I logged into the joint access account I'd opened with my parents years ago when Dad had surgery and needed help managing bills. It was still linked to my name, still gave them quiet access to my finances. I revoked it. Then I went through all my accounts one by one, checking for anything they might still have eyes on: insurance shared statements, tax documents they used to handle for me. Every door they had ever opened under the guise of helping, I shut. By the time I finished, it was past midnight, but I didn't feel tired. There was something cold and focused inside me now, like a thread pulled taut. They'd moved in secret, quietly, laying plans and justifying them as helping the family. They thought I'd roll over like always. Instead, I moved faster. When James called me back the next morning, his voice had a new energy. "He's in," he said. "Full price minus your discount. Wants to close as soon as inspection's clear." "Do it," I said. "Send me what you need." The next few days blurred into documents, signatures, phone calls. I didn't tell anyone, not friends, not coworkers, not even my aunt. Who would have understood I wasn't looking for advice? I was reclaiming something quietly, legally, and without permission. By Thursday afternoon, the deed was filed, the funds cleared, and the cabin no longer belonged to me. But it sure as hell didn't belong to them either. 2 weeks passed with nothing but silence. No calls, no voicemails, not even one of Mom's subtle guilt texts. For a while, I let myself believe maybe they'd moved on. Maybe they found another way to get Emily her dream apartment. Maybe they'd realized what they were doing and quietly let go. Then, on a Tuesday morning, my phone rang. It was Mom. I let it buzz twice before answering. "Hello?" Her voice was sharp, panicked, and louder than usual. "Maya, what's going on?" We went up to the cabin with a couple who wanted to see the place. And the locks. Someone changed the locks. None of our keys work. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, even though I already knew what I was going to say. "I know," I said. "You changed them. Why we have people ready to buy it?" "It's not my house anymore," I said. There was silence. And then she laughed, but it was that brittle kind of laugh. More nerves than humor. "Very funny, but seriously, the buyers are getting annoyed and your father's furious. This is making everything more complicated than it needs to be." "I'm not joking," I said calmly. "I sold the house. Last week, the new owners installed those locks." The silence stretched longer this time. I could picture her face, her mouth opening and closing, trying to process the fact that I had moved faster than she expected. Finally, she said, "You what? You heard me. Without even telling us." Her voice cracked. "Maya, how could you do something so spiteful?" "I didn't do it out of spite," I said. "I did it because it was mine, and I was done pretending I owed it to you." She started saying something else, but I didn't wait to hear it. I hit end and set the phone on the counter. My hands trembled for a few seconds, my body catching up to the adrenaline that had held me still through the call. But then a strange, unexpected calm settled in. For the first time in years, I'd said no and meant it. They couldn't guilt me into reversing anything. The deed was final. The money was already working to clean up my own debt. I had acted without asking for permission, and there was no apology coming. I stood in the kitchen a while longer, the quiet wrapping around me like armor. Then the phone lit up again. This time it was Emily. I let Emily's call go to voicemail the first time and the second, but she didn't stop. By the fourth attempt, I picked up mostly out of curiosity. "Maya, what the hell is going on?" She snapped. No greeting, no pause. "Mom just called me crying about locks and buyers walking away. What did you do?" "I sold the house," I said evenly. There was a beat of silence, and then, "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. The house is no longer mine." "You didn't even tell anyone." Her voice was rising now. "We've been planning this for months. I already picked out an apartment. I hired a designer to help with the nursery theme. We told people we were moving into a new place." "Then you shouldn't have based your future on something that didn't belong to you." Her breath caught. "You don't understand. I'm pregnant." "Yes, Emily, I know. And that doesn't make it my responsibility." There was another pause. Then her voice softened, slipping into the tone she used when she wanted something. "We just needed a little help, Maya. You've always been the one who holds things together. Mom said you'd come around." I let out a quiet breath. "Figure it out like the rest of us do." Her tone snapped back to its usual pitch. "You're being cruel." "No," I said, "I'm finally being clear." There was silence, long and heavy. Then she muttered something under her breath and hung up. I stood there with the phone still in my hand, not shaking this time, not even angry, just tired of being the solution to everyone's problems. They had built their entire plan around my compliance. They assumed I'd fold because I always had, but they never asked what would happen if I didn't. The silence after her call didn't feel like guilt. It felt like a door closing. Not slammed, just shut. 2 more days passed without a word. Then James called again, this time not about documents or inspections. "Maya," he said, "you're not going to believe what happened." "Maya," James said carefully. "The sheriff, your buyer, just called me. There was a break-in at the cabin over the weekend." My stomach twisted. "Is he all right?" "He wasn't there, but the alarm went off. Caught everything on the cameras. The guy tried to force the back door open with a crowbar, then circled around trying the windows. I already knew before he said it. It was your father." I closed my eyes. "He's been arrested. The sheriff recognized him from the paperwork and called the local PD instead of handling it himself. Said he wanted to keep things above board." "Of course," I murmured. "Thank you for telling me." "I'm sorry," James added. I wish I could say I was surprised. We hung up and I sat in silence until my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. "Maya," she cried before I could say a word. "You have to fix this. Your father was just trying to get into your property. He didn't know it was sold for real. Call the sheriff. Tell him it's a misunderstanding." "It's not a misunderstanding," I said. "He thought you were bluffing," she said desperately. "We didn't think you'd actually go through with it. You had the ad online. You were arranging showings. You were going to forge my signature. And now you're shocked that I didn't let you get away with it. Don't be cruel. He's your father." "No," I said, "he's a man who broke into someone else's home on purpose. After being told it wasn't his. He could go to jail. He made that choice." "You're heartless," she whispered. "No, I'm just done." I hung up and turned off my phone. There was nothing left to explain. They hadn't misunderstood anything. They knew exactly what they were doing. They just never imagined I'd finally say no. And this time, no one was going to talk me out of it. It didn't take long for the news to spread. Small towns, small circles. The sheriff didn't press charges for trespassing, but my dad didn't walk away untouched. The incident went into an official report. Within a week, his employer, Mall Security, found out. They let him go quietly. No confrontation, just a termination letter and a severance check too small to matter. Mom stopped calling after that for a few weeks. Everything went silent again. Then Aunt Sarah reached out. She didn't lecture. She never did. She just gave me the facts. They've burned through most of their savings, legal fees, paying people back, and Emily and Noah moved in with them. I almost laughed when I heard that part. The dream apartment dissolved, and now the golden child was back in her childhood bedroom pregnant, married and sandwiched between two people who were unraveling. They're not doing well, Sarah said gently. Your mom's been working more hours at the grocery store. Emily's complaining a lot. And your dad, well, he's not handling the downtime. I thanked her for letting me know, but I didn't ask for updates. They had always talked about family like it meant obligation, like helping them was proof of love. But now that I wasn't the one holding it all together, everything was crumbling. And I didn't feel guilty. I felt clear. For years, I thought my role in the family was essential, that if I stepped away, they'd collapse. Turns out I was right. But instead of feeling needed, I just felt free. I made dinner that night alone with music on low and my phone turned off. I didn't feel like rescuing anyone. I didn't feel like apologizing. The next morning, I woke up without dread and I made my first therapy appointment. The first session was hard. I sat on the couch unsure where to start, staring at a framed photo of a tree above the bookshelf, like it might offer me the words I couldn't find. Dr. Patel didn't rush me. She waited. I told her everything haltingly at first, then all at once. The cabin, the forged sale, the wedding money, the monthly payments. The silence I always kept because making noise felt like betrayal. She listened without blinking. When I finally stopped talking, she said, "You weren't their daughter, Maya. You were their emergency fund." I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. Instead, something inside me just clicked like a key turning in the right lock after years of jamming the wrong one. We talked about boundaries, patterns, the long, quiet grooming that teaches you love and debt are the same thing. She gave it a name, financial abuse, and it fit. I went home afterward and sat in my living room for a long time. No TV, no music, just the steady hum of the refrigerator and the traffic outside my window. I looked at the space around me. Not big, not fancy, but mine. And I let the stillness sink in. That night, I slept through without waking. No texts buzzing at midnight. No bank alerts, no weight in my chest reminding me that someone somewhere was disappointed I hadn't fixed something for them. For the first time in years, I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the one carrying anyone else's weight. And I started to wonder what it might look like to carry only my own. 7 months later, I walked through a quiet neighborhood just outside the city, hands in my coat pockets, eyes scanning the yard in front of me. The house was small, modest, really, but it had a garden, not much more than a patch of dirt now. But I could already picture the lavender and basil growing there, maybe even tomatoes if I got brave. The realtor unlocked the door and let me step in first. The floors creaked. The kitchen smelled like lemon polish. No granite countertops, no vaulted ceilings, just a clean slate, a space that hadn't been soaked in someone else's expectations. I didn't have to call anyone to ask what they thought. 2 weeks later, the papers were signed. The house was mine. I bought a used Toyota after that, something reliable. Nothing flashy. The old car had finally died. And for once, replacing it didn't mean cutting into groceries or skipping rent. I paid in full. No loan, no co-signer, no family involved. Every month now, I set aside money not for emergencies caused by someone else, but for things I actually wanted: a weekend trip to the coast, a class on herb gardening, maybe a new mattress. My bank account wasn't just a revolving door for other people's needs anymore. It was mine. The silence in my life used to feel heavy. Now it feels like air. No crisis calls, no guilt texts, No obligation tangled in every holiday. I wake up, I work, I cook dinner in my quiet kitchen, I go to therapy, I make plans, small ones mine. No one tells me who I need to be. And I finally understand freedom isn't loud. It's the soft, steady hum of a life that belongs to no one but me. Maya learns that love isn't synonymous with obligation. For years, she equated her worth with her family's reliance on her quietly shouldering their financial burdens under the guise of being the responsible one. The betrayal of her parents attempting to sell her cabin reveals their manipulation, teaching her that true love doesn't demand sacrifice without consent. By selling the cabin herself and cutting financial ties, Maya reclaims her autonomy, recognizing that setting boundaries isn't cruel but essential. She discovers freedom in a life unburdened by others' expectations, finding peace in carrying only her own weight.
The phone call came 3 days before Tommy's 8th birthday party. My sister Catherine's voice carried that familiar tone of polite condescension that I'd grown accustomed to over the years. "Hi, Jessica. I wanted to talk to you about Tommy's party on Saturday." "What about it?" I asked, setting down the prototype I'd been working on in my home workshop. "Well, it's just that this year we're really trying to make it special. We've invited all the kids from his class plus their parents, and we want everything to be, well, impressive." "Okay. The thing is, I know you always like to bring gifts for Tommy, and that's sweet, but this year I think it might be better if you just didn't." I stopped what I was doing. "You don't want me to bring a gift for my nephew's birthday?" "It's not that we don't appreciate the gesture," Catherine said quickly. "It's just that your gifts are always so basic. Remember last year? You gave him that wooden toy car when all the other kids were getting electronics and brand name items. The wooden toy car. I'd spent 3 weeks handcrafting it in my workshop, designing custom features and painting it with meticulous detail. Tommy had played with it for hours at the party, but apparently that hadn't impressed Catherine. Tommy seemed to like the car. Of course he did, he's a polite child. But Jessica, the other parents noticed these things. When Tommy opens presents, it reflects on our family. This year we're trying to maintain a certain standard. Catherine had married well, her husband Mark was a successful lawyer, and she'd become increasingly concerned with appearances over the past few years. What kind of standard? Well, for example, the Hendersons are giving Tommy the new gaming system that just came out. The Parkers got him the limited edition action figure set that costs $300. These are successful families, Jessica. They understand quality. What Catherine didn't understand was that I could easily afford to buy Tommy a dozen gaming systems or every limited edition toy on the market. But she'd never bothered to ask about my work or my finances, instead assuming that because I lived simply and worked from home, I must be struggling. "I see. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings," Catherine continued. "It's just that you work from home doing, what is it again? Crafts. Product design. Right, crafts. And I know that doesn't pay very well, so I don't want you to feel pressured to spend money you don't have on expensive gifts. Product design. I was actually the founder and CEO of Apex Innovations, a company that designed and manufactured high-end collectible items for major entertainment franchises. My crafts were prototypes for products that sold for hundreds or thousands of dollars to collectors worldwide. Catherine, I can afford to buy Tommy a nice gift. I'm sure you think you can, but honey, the gifts at this party are going to be really expensive. Like several $100s expensive. I don't want you to go into debt trying to keep up." "I won't go into debt. Look, why don't you just come to the party and enjoy yourself? Your presence is gift enough. Tommy will understand." After hanging up, I sat in my workshop surrounded by prototypes, custom designs, and samples from my latest projects. On my desk was a contract for a new line of limited edition collectibles that would generate approximately $2 million in revenue over the next year. But my sister thought I made crafts for pocket change. I looked at the gift I'd been preparing for Tommy, a custom-designed action figure based on his favorite character from the Star Wars universe. It wasn't just any action figure. It was a one-of-a-kind prototype that I'd been developing for a new premium line. The figure was made from high-grade materials, featured dozens of articulation points, came with custom accessories that I'd designed specifically for Tommy's interests, and was housed in a custom display case with LED lighting. It was essentially priceless, the only one of its kind in existence. But Catherine would probably see it as another cheap craft project. I decided to bring it anyway. Saturday arrived with perfect weather for a backyard birthday party. Catherine and Mark's house in the suburbs was decorated with expensive-looking decorations, and the guest list was clearly composed of well-to-do families driving luxury cars. Jessica. Catherine greeted me at the door, her smile a bit forced. I'm so glad you could make it. You didn't bring a gift, did you? I thought we discussed this. I brought something small, I said, holding up an elegantly wrapped box about the size of a shoebox. Catherine's face fell slightly. Oh. Well, I suppose, just try to give it to him quietly, okay? Maybe after the other presents. The party was in full swing in the backyard, with about 20 children and their parents mingling around tables laden with catered food and an elaborate bounce house. I recognized the type of gathering, every detail carefully chosen to impress. Jessica. Tommy ran up to me with the pure joy that only 8-year-olds can muster. Aunt Jess. You came. Of course I came, buddy. Happy birthday. Did you make me something cool in your workshop? I smiled. Tommy was the only family member who'd ever shown genuine interest in my work, often asking to see my latest projects when I visited. I might have made something special just for you. Awesome. Can I see it now? Tommy, Catherine intervened quickly. Aunt Jessica's gift is small, so we'll save it for last, okay? Let's start with the big presents. The gift opening ceremony was exactly what I'd expected. Tommy sat in the center of a circle while parents and children watched him unwrap increasingly expensive presents. The gaming system Catherine had mentioned, several $100 toy sets, high-end sporting equipment, designer clothes. Each gift was met with polite applause from the adults and excited squeals from the children. I could see Catherine beaming with pride as the pile of impressive gifts grew larger. This is amazing, Tommy said after opening what appeared to be a remote-controlled drone worth at least $500. Just wait until you see what we got you, Mark said proudly, gesturing to a large box that hadn't been opened yet. The final big gift was a top-of-the-line bicycle with all the accessories, easily worth over $1,000. Tommy was appropriately excited, and the adults murmured appreciatively about the quality and expense. Well, Catherine said, glancing at me nervously, I think that's all the presents. What about Aunt Jess's present? Tommy asked, looking around. Oh, that's just a small thing, sweetie. We can look at it later. But I want to see what Aunt Jess made for me. She always makes the coolest stuff. Several parents turned to look at me with polite interest. I could see Catherine's discomfort as she realized she couldn't avoid this moment any longer. It's really nothing special, Catherine said to the group apologetically. Jessica does crafts as a hobby. I'd love to see what you made, said one of the mothers kindly. Handmade gifts are so thoughtful. With resigned acceptance, Catherine gestured for me to bring forward my gift. I handed the box to Tommy, who immediately began tearing off the wrapping paper with enthusiasm. The first thing he revealed was the custom display case. A sleek, professional-looking black box with a clear front panel and subtle LED lighting around the edges. Whoa, said one of the kids. That looks expensive. Tommy carefully opened the case, and I watched his face transform from curiosity to absolute amazement. Oh my God, he screamed at the top of his lungs. It's the limited edition Shadow Trooper. Every parent in the circle leaned forward to get a better look. But not just any Shadow Trooper, Tommy continued, his voice getting higher with excitement. This is the ultra-rare prototype version. He carefully lifted the figure from its case, and I could see the adults around the circle beginning to realize this wasn't a typical handmade gift. Look at the detail, Tommy announced to everyone. It has real metal armor pieces. And look, the weapons light up. And it talks. He pressed a button on the figure and it spoke several lines of dialogue in perfect voice quality. Tommy, said one of the fathers, leaning in closer, where did this come from? I've never seen one like this. My Aunt Jess made it in her workshop. She makes the coolest stuff. Made it? Asked one of the mothers, clearly confused. Like actually manufactured it? I could see Catherine's face growing pale as she realized this wasn't going according to her plan. Jessica, said Mark, Tommy's father, what exactly do you do for work? I design collectible items for entertainment franchises, I said simply. You mean like, professionally? Yes. One of the fathers, who I could tell was knowledgeable about collectibles, asked to examine the figure more closely. Tommy handed it over proudly. This is incredible craftsmanship, the man said, turning the figure over in his hands. The articulation, the materials, the paint application, this is professional-grade work. It's a prototype, I explained. I designed it specifically for Tommy based on his interests. A prototype? Asked one of the mothers. What does that mean exactly? It means there's only one in existence. I created it as a test model for a new product line. The adults were now all focused entirely on the action figure, passing it carefully around the circle and marveling at the details. What company do you work for? Asked another father. I own my own company. Apex Innovations. One of the mothers gasped. Apex Innovations? You mean the company that makes those incredible limited edition collectibles? Yes. Oh my God, she continued, pulling out her phone. My brother collects your figures. He paid $2,000 for the limited edition Vader you released last year. Catherine's mouth fell open. $2,000? For one action figure? Mark asked. Apex Innovations makes the most sought-after collectibles in the world, the mother explained, showing photos on her phone. They only produce small quantities and collectors pay enormous amounts for them. Another parent leaned forward. So when you say this is a prototype, I mean it's literally priceless, I said. It's the only one that will ever exist with these exact specifications. Tommy, who had been following the adult conversation with fascination, suddenly understood the magnitude of his gift. You mean this is worth more than all my other presents combined? Probably worth more than all the presents here combined, said the father who'd been examining the figure. The silence that followed was profound. Jessica, Catherine said weakly, I had no idea you were. I didn't realize. That I was successful? I asked gently. Well, yes. Catherine, you never asked about my work. When I told you I designed products, you assumed I was making crafts for craft fairs. When I said I worked from home, you assumed I was struggling financially. One of the mothers turned to Catherine. Your sister owns Apex Innovations and you didn't know. She never said. Because every time I tried to talk about my work, you changed the subject or made assumptions, I said, not unkindly. Tommy, meanwhile, was back to playing with his figure, completely absorbed in exploring all its features. This is the best present I've ever gotten, he announced to the group. Aunt Jess, how did you know exactly what I wanted? Because I pay attention when you talk about your interests, I said. I designed every detail based on things you've told me you liked. Can you make more of these? Asked one of the children. This one is special just for Tommy. But I am working on a line of similar figures that will be available next year. How much will they cost? Asked a parent. The standard versions will retail for around $400. Limited editions will be significantly more. Catherine looked like she was struggling to process this information. $400, she repeated. For the basic version. Tommy's is a one-of-a-kind prototype with features that won't be available in the commercial release. Mark cleared his throat. Jessica, I think we owe you an apology. For what? For assuming your gifts were less than generous. You assumed they were cheap because you judged them by price rather than by the thought and effort that went into them, I said. Tommy's wooden car last year took me 3 weeks to design and build. I researched his favorite colors, his favorite car types, even included features I thought he'd enjoy. And he loved it, Tommy piped up. I still play with it all the time. But we didn't appreciate the craftsmanship, Catherine said quietly. We just saw homemade and assumed it meant inferior. Handmade doesn't mean cheap, said one of the other parents. It means customized, personal, unique. Especially when it's made by someone with professional-level skills, added another. As the party continued, I found myself surrounded by parents asking about my work, my company, and the collectibles industry. Several mentioned that their children were huge fans of my products, and they'd had no idea the creator was Catherine's sister. So you're actually quite successful, Catherine said to me later as we cleaned up. Yes. And you could have bought Tommy any of the expensive presents the other families brought. I could have bought him everything on his wish list without thinking about it. But you chose to make him something personal instead. I chose to create something unique that showed I understand who he is and what he loves. Catherine was quiet for a moment. I feel terrible about telling you not to bring a gift. You should feel terrible about assuming my gifts weren't good enough without understanding what they actually were. You're right. I made judgments based on prejudices about handmade versus store-bought, expensive versus meaningful. Tommy ran up to us, still clutching his action figure. Aunt Jess, can I come visit your workshop sometime? I want to see how you make these. Of course, buddy. I'll show you the whole process. And maybe I can help design one? I'd love that. Catherine watched this exchange with a new understanding in her eyes. Jessica, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not just because I found out you're successful, but because you put so much thought and care into making Tommy happy. That's what gift giving should be about, I said. Not impressing other parents but showing the person you care about them. Will you forgive me for being so awful about this? I'll forgive you. But I hope you'll remember this the next time you're tempted to judge something by its price tag rather than its value. I will. And Jessica? Yes. Next year I want you to bring whatever gift you think Tommy would love, regardless of what it costs or where it comes from. Deal. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the day's events. My family had learned valuable lessons about assumptions, about the difference between price and value, about the importance of understanding someone's situation before judging it. But more importantly, Tommy had learned that the best gifts come from people who pay attention to who you are and what matters to you. The next week, Catherine called me with an unusual request. Jessica, I was wondering, would you be willing to design something custom for Mark's birthday? I want to give him something that shows I really thought about what he'd love. What does he love? Classic cars. Specifically, 1967 Mustangs. I can work with that. 3 months later, I presented Mark with a custom-designed scale model of a 1967 Mustang, complete with a working engine, functional lights, and details based on his specific preferences that Catherine had observed and noted over the years. He cried when he opened it. This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me, he said. How did you know to include all these specific details? Because Catherine paid attention to what you love and shared those details with me. The custom model, while not as expensive as a luxury watch or high-end electronics, meant more to Mark than any store-bought gift ever could. A year later, my nephew's 9th birthday party was completely different. The focus was on creativity, personalization, and thoughtfulness rather than price tags and brand names. Several parents had asked me to help them design custom gifts for their own children. Tommy's gift that year was a custom action figure of himself as a superhero, complete with powers and accessories based on his personality and interests. He declared it even better than the prototype from the previous year. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from children who understand that the best gifts aren't the most expensive ones, they're the ones that show someone really sees you and cares enough to create something just for you. And sometimes it takes a room full of adults realizing they've misjudged handmade creativity to understand that true value can't be measured in dollars. It can only be measured in love, thought, and the joy it brings to someone who matters to you. The funeral had been perfectly orchestrated, just like everything else in the Thompson family. Black suits, expensive flowers, and fake tears from people who hadn't spoken to Dad in years but showed up hoping for a piece of his fortune. I stood in the back corner of the chapel, watching my half-brothers David and Michael work the crowd like politicians at a campaign rally. "Thank you all for coming," David announced from the podium, his voice dripping with false sincerity. Our father would have been so moved to see how many lives he touched. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dad had barely spoken to most of these people. He'd spent the last 10 years of his life isolated in his mansion, bitter and alone, driven away from everyone by his own greed and paranoia. Everyone except me. I was the bastard son, the product of Dad's affair with his secretary 28 years ago. While David and Michael grew up in the main house with their mother Patricia, I was raised across town by my mom, visiting Dad on alternate weekends like some kind of consolation prize. Now, David continued, pulling out a folded document, I know everyone is wondering about Dad's final wishes. Michael and I want to be transparent about this. Michael stepped forward, his expensive suit fitting him perfectly. At 35 he was 3 years older than me and had never let me forget it. Dad left very clear instructions. As his legitimate sons, we've inherited the business empire he built. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Thompson Industries was worth approximately $180 million. A logistics and shipping company that Dad had built from nothing over 4 decades. Everyone in the room knew what that inheritance meant. Of course, David added with a patronizing smile in my direction, Dad made provisions for Marcus as well. A trust fund that will provide for his modest needs. I said nothing. I'd learned long ago that speaking up in Thompson family gatherings only led to public humiliation. Better to stay quiet and let them reveal themselves. Patricia, their mother, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Richard was always so thoughtful about family, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Even the extended family. The extended family comment landed exactly as she'd intended. I was the reminder of Dad's infidelity, the living proof that her perfect marriage had been a lie. She'd never forgiven me for existing. The will is very clear, Michael said, waving the document. Thompson Industries, the estate, the investment portfolio, everything goes to David and myself as it should. More nods from the crowd. Made sense to them. Why would a bastard son inherit anything significant? I was lucky to get anything at all. Father Martinez, the family priest, stepped forward to begin the final blessing. Let us pray for Richard Thompson's soul and for the family he leaves behind. As heads bowed, I found myself thinking about the real Dad. Not the public figure these people thought they knew, but the complicated, lonely man I'd spent time with over the past few years. While David and Michael had been busy with their own lives, barely visiting, I'd been the one checking on Dad regularly. I'd been the one who drove him to doctor appointments when his health started failing. I'd been the one who sat with him during chemo treatments, listening to his stories about building the company from nothing. Most importantly, I'd been the one he talked to about his disappointments. Those boys never worked a day in their lives, he told me 6 months ago, his voice weak from treatment. Everything handed to them on a silver platter. They think the business runs itself. Maybe they'll learn, I'd said. Dad had laughed bitterly. At 50 million each. They'll run it into the ground within 5 years. All my work wasted. It was during one of those conversations that Dad had made a decision that would change everything. Now, as Father Martinez finished his prayer, I watched my half-brothers soak up the condolences and congratulations. They were already planning their new lives as multimillionaires, already counting money they thought was theirs. Thank you all for being here, David said as the service concluded. There will be a reception at the house, and then tomorrow we'll begin the process of transferring Dad's assets. People began filing out, stopping to shake hands with David and Michael, offering their sympathies and their congratulations on their inheritance. A few people nodded at me politely, but most ignored me entirely. I was about to leave when the chapel doors opened and an elderly man in an expensive suit walked in. He looked around the room with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, clearly searching for someone. "Excuse me," he called out in a clear, authoritative voice. "I'm looking for the Thompson family. I'm Robert Harrison from Harrison, Wells and Associates." David stepped forward immediately. "I'm David Thompson. This is my brother Michael. We've been expecting you." "Actually," the man said, consulting a leather portfolio, "I'm looking for Marcus Thompson specifically." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me as I raised my hand uncertainly. "I'm Marcus." Mr. Harrison walked over to me with purpose. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was a remarkable man." "Thank you," I said quietly. "I need to speak with you about your father's estate. Is there somewhere private we can talk?" David interrupted loudly. "Excuse me, Mr. Harrison, but there must be some mistake. The estate matters have already been settled. My brother and I are the primary beneficiaries." Mr. Harrison turned to David with a confused expression. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly?" "David Thompson. Richard Thompson's son." "And you are?" "Michael Thompson. Also Richard's son." Mr. Harrison nodded slowly. "I see. And who prepared the estate documents you're referring to?" Michael pulled out the will they'd been waving around. "Our family attorney, James Mitchell, handled everything." "Interesting," Mr. Harrison said, examining the document. "Because James Mitchell hasn't been your father's attorney for over 2 years. Your father fired him and hired my firm to handle all his legal affairs." The color began draining from David's face. That's impossible. We spoke with Mitchell just last week." "About what?" "About Dad's will, obviously. He explained everything to us." Mr. Harrison's expression grew stern. "Mr. Mitchell had no authority to discuss your father's estate. In fact, the document you're holding is legally meaningless." Patricia stepped forward, her voice shaking. "What are you saying?" I'm saying that this, he held up the fake will, is not Richard Thompson's last will and testament. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. David grabbed the document back from Mr. Harrison. This is ridiculous. That man has been our family lawyer for 20 years. Had been, Mr. Harrison corrected. Your father terminated his services after discovering some irregularities in how Mitchell was handling certain matters. Michael was now visibly sweating. What kind of irregularities? The kind that led to Mr. Mitchell losing his law license last month. The crowd was now watching this drama unfold like spectators at a tennis match. I could see neighbors, business associates and family friends all hanging on every word. Now then, Mr. Harrison continued, turning back to me. Marcus, your father's actual estate planning is quite extensive. We need to discuss the transfer of Thompson Industries, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolios and several other assets. Transfer to who? David demanded. Mr. Harrison looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language. To Marcus, of course. He's the sole beneficiary. If the room had been quiet before, it was dead silent now. You could have heard a pin drop. That's impossible, Patricia whispered. I assure you it's not. Your father made his wishes very clear. Marcus Thompson inherits the entire estate, valued at approximately $180 million. David's face had gone from pale to red. There has to be a mistake. Dad wouldn't leave everything to him. He's not even. Not even what? Mr. Harrison asked sharply. Not even legitimate, Michael finished. The lawyer's expression turned ice cold. Mr. Thompson acknowledged Marcus as his son and legal heir over 20 years ago. His inheritance rights are unquestionable. I was still processing what I was hearing. Dad had left me everything? The entire company, the house, all of it. Furthermore, Mr. Harrison continued, your father specifically instructed me to explain his reasoning if anyone contested the will. He pulled out a sealed envelope from his portfolio. This is a letter your father wrote, to be read in exactly this situation. You don't have to. I started to say. Actually, I do. Your father was very specific about this. He opened the envelope and began reading in a clear voice that carried throughout the chapel. To my sons David and Michael, by the time you hear this, you've probably already celebrated your inheritance. You've probably already spent the money in your minds, already planned your lives as wealthy men who never had to work for anything. The truth is, I've been watching all of you for years. I've seen who visits me when I'm sick, who calls just to check on me, who actually cares about me as a person rather than as a bank account. Marcus has been a son to me in every way that matters. He's worked summers at the company since he was 16, learning the business from the ground up. He's driven me to medical appointments, sat with me during treatments and been there when I needed family. David and Michael, you've visited me exactly 4 times in the past 2 years, and 3 of those visits were to ask for money. Marcus has never asked me for anything. He's built his own life, earned his own money and treated me with respect not because of what I could give him, but because I'm his father. Therefore, I leave my entire estate to Marcus Thompson, confident that he will honor the family name and use these resources wisely. To David and Michael, you each have trust funds worth $500,000 that I established years ago. That money, combined with your educations and your opportunities, should be enough to build your own lives. I suggest you learn to work for what you want just like I did. Mr. Harrison folded the letter and looked around the room. The will is ironclad, witnessed by 3 independent parties and filed with the probate court. There are no grounds for contest. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Finally, David found his voice. This is insane. Dad was obviously not in his right mind. He was sick, he was on medication. Your father was evaluated by 2 independent psychiatrists before signing this will, Mr. Harrison interrupted. He was found to be completely competent and clear-minded. Michael turned to me with fury in his eyes. You manipulated him. You took advantage of a sick old man. Actually, Mr. Harrison said before I could respond, your father specifically anticipated that accusation. The will includes detailed documentation of Marcus's character and actions over the past several years, compared to yours. He pulled out another document. Your father kept meticulous records. Marcus visited him 127 times in the past 2 years. David, you visited 4 times. Michael, you visited twice. The numbers hung in the air like an indictment. Marcus drove your father to 23 medical appointments. Neither of you offered to help with even one. Patricia was now crying, but not from grief. From rage. When your father was hospitalized last Christmas, Mr. Harrison continued, Marcus spent 3 days sleeping in the hospital chair. You two didn't even know he was there until Marcus called you. We had our own lives. David protested. Indeed you did. Lives funded by trust funds your father established, jobs at companies where your father was a major investor, houses purchased with down payments your father provided. And yet when he needed you, you were nowhere to be found. The crowd was now openly staring at David and Michael with a mixture of shock and disgust. These weren't grieving sons. They were opportunists who'd been caught. There's one more thing, Mr. Harrison said, turning back to me. Your father wanted you to know about the company. Thompson Industries has been struggling for the past 3 years, largely due to poor decisions made by the current management team. He gestured toward David and Michael. Your father had been planning to restructure the entire operation. He felt that new leadership was necessary to save the company and its 847 employees. What does that mean? I asked. It means you now own a company that employs nearly 1,000 people, and your decisions will determine whether they keep their jobs. The weight of that responsibility hit me immediately. This wasn't just about inheriting money. It was about inheriting the livelihoods of hundreds of families. Your father believed you were the only one who could turn the company around. He's been watching how you handle pressure, how you treat people, how you make decisions. This inheritance isn't just a gift, it's a test. David was now shaking with rage. This is theft. Plain and simple theft. No, I said quietly, speaking up for the first time. This is consequences. Everyone turned to look at me. For 10 years you two treated Dad like an ATM machine. You showed up when you needed money, ignored him when you didn't. You never worked at the company, never learned the business, never cared about anything except what you could get from him. My voice grew stronger. I didn't visit Dad to get an inheritance. I visited him because he was my father and he was alone and he was scared. Patricia stepped forward. You have no right to judge us. You're right, I said. I don't. But Dad did. And this is his judgment. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. The estate transfer will begin immediately. Marcus, we need to schedule several meetings to review all the assets and business operations. Of course. There is one final item, he said, pulling out a small envelope. Your father wanted you to have this privately. I took the envelope, recognizing Dad's handwriting on the outside. For Marcus, to be opened when you're ready to understand. What about us? Michael demanded. What are we supposed to do? Mr. Harrison consulted his notes. You each have access to trust funds worth $500,000. Your father suggested you use that money to learn how to build something yourselves. 500,000? David's voice cracked. That's nothing. The company alone is worth over 100 million. Then perhaps you should have valued your father as more than just a source of income, I said. As people began filing out of the chapel, many stopped to congratulate me, though most seemed shocked by the turn of events. The neighbors who'd ignored me earlier were now very interested in shaking my hand. Patricia approached me last, her face a mask of controlled fury. This isn't over, she said quietly. We'll fight this. With what lawyers? I asked. The ones you can afford on your husband's life insurance? She turned and walked away, followed by David and Michael, who were already arguing about their next move. Mr. Harrison and I were the last ones left in the chapel. Your father was very proud of you, he said quietly. He talked about you often during our meetings. I still can't believe he did this. He said you'd say that. He also said to tell you that this wasn't charity, it was an investment in the future he wanted to see. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. What am I supposed to do with all this? Whatever you think is right. Your father trusted your judgment more than his own. That evening I sat in Dad's study, my study now, and opened the final letter. Marcus, it began, if you're reading this, then you've inherited more than you ever expected and more than you probably wanted. I know this feels overwhelming. It felt overwhelming to me too when I was your age and starting the company. The money isn't the point. The company isn't even the point. The point is what you do with the opportunity. I built Thompson Industries to support families, to create jobs, to build something that would last. But somewhere along the way I lost sight of that. I became focused on accumulating wealth instead of creating value. David and Michael see money as something to be spent. You see it as something to be used. That's why you're the right person to carry this forward. Don't let anyone tell you that you don't deserve this. You earned it through kindness, through loyalty, through being the son I needed when I needed one most. Build something better than I did. Treat people better than I did. And remember that the real wealth isn't in the bank accounts. It's in the lives you touch along the way. I love you, son. Make me proud. I folded the letter and looked around the study. Tomorrow I would start learning how to run a company. I would figure out how to save those 847 jobs. I would become the leader that Dad believed I could be. But tonight I just sat there missing my father and trying to understand how my life had changed so completely in a single afternoon. The bastard son had become the heir. The afterthought had become the future. And somehow, Dad had known all along that this was how it was supposed to be. 3 months later, Thompson Industries announced its most profitable quarter in 5 years, thanks to new leadership and a renewed focus on employee welfare and customer service. David and Michael used their trust funds to start a consulting business. It failed within 6 months. Patricia moved to Florida, where she tells anyone who'll listen about how her stepson stole her son's rightful inheritance. And I kept Dad's picture on the desk and tried every day to build something he would be proud of. Because sometimes the most powerful inheritance isn't money, it's the responsibility to do better than those who came before you.